they sweat under without complaints. So I think we need to recognise and support emergency staff, no matter whether they be nurses, doctors, ambulance officers or whatever, in the difficult times that they have at the current COVID. Thank you.
I support Councillor Janice's congratulations are all first responders and emergency staff in Victoria. And Councillor Janice, you may need to get close to your microphone.
All right, I'll eat it. You're any closer.
Declarations by councillors of conflict of interest. And that's to item 8.222, event funding program. Councillor Forsyth. Declared a conflict of interest with respect to the following: La Fiera Festival, Myrtleford Bush Market, Myrtleford Show and Shine and Swap Meet, as he is a member of the Myrtleford Chamber of Commerce and Rotary Club and was not present for the assessment of these applications. Are there any further conflicts of interest?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is that?
That's better.
Thank you. Just also on the committee for the community grants, and although with the Myrtleford Men's Shed and the Myrtleford Landcare Group, I have an interest there, and I left those that part of the meeting when those deliberations were had, and came back once that decision was made.
Thank you, Councillor Janice. Could that be noted, Councillor Janice's declaration? I will note at this point for both the event funding and the grant funding that council officers in attendance were not present when the recommendation were being made, but are as such able to vote on those recommendations in the council meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I think you mean councillors.
Yeah,
not council officers.
Not council officers.
Oh, sorry, I meant councillors, not council officers. I apologise. Public questions, of which we have two on notice. The first one I have is from Jean-Pierre Ronco. I would like to submit two questions on notice. Question 1. Due to a very hard 2020 year with bushfires and COVID-19 crisis in Australia affecting many community events in the Alpine Shire, for which reason did Alpine Shire Event Funding Committee allocate $167,744 instead of the full amount of $212,000 as reported in the 2020-21 Alpine Shire budget? Mr. Jeremy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The event funding panel comprised a member of the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce, a member of the Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association, a member of the Myrtleford Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Jeremy, could you speak close to the microphone, please?
I'll repeat that. The event funding assessment panel comprised one member of the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce, one member of the Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association, one member of the Myrtleford Chamber of Commerce, two councillors, being Councillor Forsyth and Councillor Keeble, Director of Assets myself, and the manager of that department. Each of the applications was reviewed by the assessment panel and considered on their merits, and the recommendations that are before you today are the recommendations of those panels.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Question 2. What is the reason of the discrepancy between the festivals and events budget of $212,000 as reported in the 2021 Alpine Shire budget and the cumulative total of $200,000 of the 2020-21 event funding program recommendation, point 4, as reported in the agenda of the 4th of August 2020 Alpine Shire Ordinary Council meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. $12,000 in the 2021 budget has been allocated to delivery of civic events. So that is the Australia Day programme and the citizenship ceremonies.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Question from Jane Sullivan. Question 1. Alpine Shire allocated $30,000 for a review of the Paul Punker transfer station in its recent proposed budget. Is it being closed or moved? And if so, where will the more than 3,000 ratepayers from Paul Punker and Bright to Harrietfield, etc. go to take their rubbish or recycled material? Mr. Jeremy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no current plan to close the Paul Punker transfer station. The allocation of funds within the budget are for the relocation of the office and the reception amenities within the transfer station when we do the rehabilitation of that site.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Question 2. Alpine Shire and Towong Shire jointly set up Momentum One Shared Services Proprietary Limited some years ago. In 2018, Council paid $251,000 and 2019 it paid $302,000 into this shared service company which is registered in Melbourne. Can you advise if Momentum One complies with all recent labour hire legislation?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. And how much of this fee was actually paid to the many young people in the Shire for pool functions?
The clear majority, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. Under the Alpine Shire Public Transparency Policy, with the accounts and details of this shared service... Excuse me, I'll start that again. Under the Alpine Shire Public Transparency Policy, will the accounts and details of this shared service be made public? Mr. Bird?
No, they will not.
Does the Audit Committee of both Towong and Alpine Shire oversee this private company and its profit and loss accounts?
Momentum One's annual report and financials are reviewed by an external auditor and also audited by Vargo, and they are shared with Council and they'll be coming to the next Council meeting. They are not reviewed by the Audit Committees of Towong and Alpine Shire.
Thank you, Mr. Bird, and hopefully that answers your question, Ms. Sullivan. On to the main meeting.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask a question of Mr. Jeremy in relation to one of his responses, please? Just a clarification, if I could.
Yes, Mr. Councillor Janice, you
Thank
may.
you. Just in Mr. Jeremy, just in relation to the funding for Australia Day awards, etc. My understanding is that we are not funded at all by the federal government to conduct those ceremonies. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Thank you, Councillor Janice. I'm afraid I have to take that on notice. I'm not aware of any funding or lack of funding from the Commonwealth Government.
Not that I'm aware of, Councillor Janice.
Yes, it's something that we, as ratepayers, bear for that wonderful ceremony of welcoming those people.
Yeah, Council commits its own funds towards celebrating that day.
Yes, thank you.
Presentation of report by officers. 8.1, Director of Assets, Mr. William Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This first report relates to the allocation of financial sponsorship and the provision of logistics support to events through Council's 2020-21 event funding programme. This is an event funding programme that runs annually. We've run it in the same format as previous years. So this year we ran it between the 15th of May and 28th of June, and we got 36 applications seeking support from Council's funds, which was a cumulative request of $415,203 in financial sponsorship. Council officers carried out a preliminary scoring of each application against the guidelines that were provided, and then this preliminary scoring was provided to an event funding and assessment panel. This panel comprised a member of the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce, a member of the Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association, a member of the Myrtleford Chamber of Commerce, two councillors being Councillor Forsyth and Councillor Keeble, Director Assets, and also the Manager of Economic and Community Development. The panel has recommended that 39 applicants receive support through the event funding panel, totalling $87,694 in financial support and an estimated value of $76,050 in logistical support, totalling $163,744 in total. This year, the budget that is available comprises $200,000 of council funds and an additional $100,000 of state government, local government bushfire recovery funds. So this $300,000 was made available to the event funding panel, and they could have funded events at any amount up to this amount this year. So the recommendation we've provided there's a list there of events that are proposed for funding with the total recommended, the sponsorship and the logistics amount. We're also recommending that if an event is cancelled as a result of COVID-19, that funding allocation for the event through the 2021 funding programme be made available to the event for the following year without the event organiser having to reapply for funds. The only proviso there is that we may need to seek an updated risk assessment from those applicants if, depending on what the situation is COVID in the following financial year. We've also noted that financial sponsorship will not be provided to event organisers unless government restrictions limiting gatherings as a result of the pandemic are lifted. and that the event organiser has provided all the required documentation to Council, including risk management plan addressing their measures to minimise transmission of COVID. We're also seeking delegation to the CEO to distribute the residual or the unspent funds to a cumulative of 200. So remember, 200,000 being the amount of council funds that have been put forward for funding. And we're also seeking council support to seek to attract one or more unique signature events to the Alpine Shire, funded to the value of $100,000, which is equal to the amount of the bushfire funding which has been allocated to the 2021 event funding programme on top of the normal allocation of $200,000. And we commit to providing feedback and assistance to the unsuccessful applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Jeremy. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Knapstein. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Knapstein. Councillor Pearce. Anyone else? Councillor Forsyth.
I'd just like to reiterate what Mr. Jeremy said, especially in note number 2, that if an event is cancelled, then the funding allocation for that event will be held over and for the event for the following year without the event organiser having to reapply for funds. Now, that doesn't necessarily preclude that event organiser from requesting more funds next year. It would be a separate application if they had a bigger and better event. And the other thing that I would just like to clarify is in point 5 of the recommendation, seeks to attract one or more unique signature events. I'm assuming in this case that a signature event might be a one-off or it could be a recurring event. Would that be correct?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. That's correct. So we haven't defined exactly yet what a signature event means, but it could be either, as you suggested, it could be a significant one-off event, or it could be funds to support the establishment of a new ongoing event for Alpine Shire.
Councillor Keeble.
Thank you. I'd like to just make a few points. I'd like to thank the other people who are on the committee that made the decisions. There was a robust discussion. And I'd also like to thank all the people that put in for the event funding. Events funding and events in our shires do drive a lot of economic value, and we understand that. And we live in a place and a shire that is blessed with a whole lot of events. It is good to see, and we hope that that continues whenever we finish out of the COVID pandemic as well. Thanks.
Anyone else? To the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Item 8.1.2.
You might have broken the internet with that one, Councillor Roper. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the allocation of funding through Council's 2021 Community Grants Programme. So like the Events Grants Programme, this is an annual programme that we run. In this year, applications were open between 15th of May and 28th of June. We received 51 eligible applications with a cumulative request of $355,000, $241 in funding. Similarly to the event funding programme, the applications were reviewed by an assessment panel, and this comprised a member of the Myrtleford Chamber of Commerce, Bright Chamber of Commerce, Upper Kiewa Valley Community Association, 2 councillors, being Councillor Janis and Councillor Knapstein, Director Assets, and the Manager of the department, the Economic and Community Development Department. The assessment panel recommended that 29 applicants receive funding, 19 receiving the full amount requested and 10 receiving funding at a reduced level. A further amount of $500 was recommended to allocated to support community groups wishing to apply for funds to Clean Up Australia Day in March 2021. Also, the Bright Community Bank branch of the Bendigo Bank has committed to contribute $26,125 towards 15 projects which were submitted as part of the Alpine Shire Council Community Grant Programme. This is the first year that we've had this partnership with the formal partnership with Bendigo Bank. So in the past we would pass on the applicants that were unsuccessful, but this year it's been a formalised process where we've sought the permission of the applicants to share their applications, and we've actually sat down as part of the event funding process and sought the support of Bendigo Bank. So that's a great outcome for the community. The funding that's been allocated this year, so council funds $80,000 have been allocated to community bushfire, so to the community grant fund. as well as an additional 40,000 from bushfire funding received from the state government. So the amount of money this year that's been allocated is $120,000 that we've funded. The recommendations are as listed in the report. So we've listed each of the applicants, the project title, grant request, recommended amount, and the total project cost there.
Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Nicholas and Councillor Keeble. Councillor Nicholas.
It's great to see so many people putting their hands up for grants that will support their communities. Sorry to the people who have missed out at this point in time. There's nothing I really want to pull out from the events, from the funding applications, except to say that not all of the grants have been, or the requests have been filled in full, and I know that it'll still take some work for the proponents to get their projects off the ground, and I wish them all the best, given that we're still waiting for the final vote.
Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Again, thanks to everyone who applied. Thanks for the committee for doing their work involved there. A question I have is, when I look at the list and just say there's been an allocation of funds, the people, the community group that get allocated the funds, are they told which part of their project the funds are allocated to, or is it up to the group to decide that?
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. So we will provide feedback to each of the applicants after this meeting. Where applicants have been part funded, in some cases we've chosen to, or the committee's recommended to fund a specific part of that application, and they'll be provided that feedback. In other cases, the committee hasn't nominated a specific part of the application, it's just funds to go towards delivery of the project or the proposal that's been put forward. But we'll communicate with each of the applicants and we'll let them know what are the conditions around the funding that they've been granted.
Wonderful, thanks.
Any further? Councillor Napstein.
I'd just like to further thank the Bright Community Bank branch of Bendigo Bank.
Councillor Janus.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Jeremy. You will be speaking to those that were successful, and I'm assuming, as previously, that those that weren't successful, there'll be conversation with those applicants as well as to why they weren't successful, and perhaps alternatives for them to address their concerns or funding applications in another manner that we can assist there.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Yes, I can confirm that we'll communicate with all applicants, whether they're successful or not, and we'll do exactly what you suggested. Where there are other grant funding opportunities for some of these unsuccessful applicants, we'll try and assist to direct them towards those. What is noticeable this year, there were some pretty significant funding asks of the panel, and recognising that there was only a limited amount of funding to go around, some of those very worthy projects will see themselves not having received funding. And particularly those projects, we're able to have conversations with them and direct them to potentially other opportunities which are more appropriate for the level of funding that they've sought.
Yes, thank you, because I envisage there will be some smaller groups who have missed out. Will need some support going forward there. Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Nicholas, any further to add? To the vote, all those in favour? Carried. Item 8.1.3, land exchange. Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the proposed exchange of a small area of road land with the landowner of Lot 1, TP837927K, Parish of Bright, which is known as 14 Riverside Avenue, Bright. In the June council meeting, we presented a report to council seeking council's support for us to go out to advertise this proposed land exchange. The proposed land exchange has been advertised and no formal submissions were received regarding the proposed land discontinuance and the exchange of land. We are now proposing to move towards gazetting the proposed transfer of land, and that's the topic of this report in front of us.
Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Napstein. Councillor Nicholas.
This is tidying up some development work that needed to happen, and it's pretty much just business, what we needed to do.
Councillor Epstein?
Ditto.
Any further? To the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.2, Director of Corporate. Ms Cook, 8.2.1.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to planning application P 2020-43 being Rogers Lane, Dedarang, and the proposal is for a re-subdivision of 4 lots into 2 lots with buildings and works for the construction of a dwelling. The re-subdivision is proposed to create 2 new lots. Proposed lot 1 will have a total area of 112.03 hectares in 4 parts, being 74.39 hectares, 36.0 hectares, 1.26 hectares, 5 hectares. Proposed lot 2 will have a total area of 46.46 hectares and of 38.77 hectares and 7.387 hectares. A portion of the proposed lot boundary of lot 2 follows an existing cleared track within the site and an existing lot boundary. A proportion of the proposed southern lot boundary of lot 2 follows an existing cleared track within the site. A western section of this proposed lot boundary is through native vegetation. A 20-metre wide carriageway easement is proposed in the eastern section of lot 2, so to the benefit of lot 1. The width of the access leg forming part of proposed lot 2 is 30.1 metres. The second part of this application is buildings and works for the construction of a dwelling. The proposed dwelling including its associated wastewater disposal area and vehicle access, is intended to be sited within proposed lot 2.
So moved.
Councillor Janus and Councillor Nicholas. Janus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Right. Thank you, Ms Cook, for that presentation. I assume councillors have read their briefing notes in relation to this, which are long and extended and well researched. I note that there was at some point a
How long ago did it stop, Will?
Call for suspension of standing orders.
Second.
Who seconded?
Second.
Tony did. Yep. All those in favour? Done. So, this system is less than perfect.
It used to work very well.
19. Oh, it's a 5G.
So change to the YouTube how they camera.
5G. Don't argue with me.
It's Zuwai. Who is it?
We're live, John.
We're back on again?
We've
Can we go back to the start? Okay, so let's resume standing orders, please. If someone can move. Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Forsyth, all those in favour? Carried. Ms Nicholas, Ms
Janus.
Cook,
Yes.
can we go back to the start of 8.2.1 in case we have a gap?
one.
Oh, it's 8.2.1.
Oh, sorry.
It's a Rogers Lane application.
Of course, Mr Mayor.
If you could quickly go back to where you were, and then we'll
Thank you.
resume with, if everyone remembers at what point they jumped in, we'll attempt to...
Thank you. I'll outline the proposal again. So this report relates to a planning application P 2020-43 being Rogers Lane, Dedarang. The proposal is for a re-subdivision of 4 lots into 2 lots with the buildings and works for construction of a dwelling. The proposal itself, there's some detail in this paragraph, the proposal itself is the re-subdivision which is proposed to create 2 new lots. The proposed lot 1 will have a total area of 112.03 hectares in 4 parts, being 74.39 hectares, 36.02 hectares, 1.126 hectares and 0.5 of a hectare. Proposed Lot 2 will have a total area of 46.46 hectares in two parts, being 38.77 hectares and 7.687 hectares. A proportion of the proposed northern lot boundary of Lot 2 follows an existing cleared track within the site and an existing lot boundary. A proportion of the proposed southern lot boundary of Lot 2 follows an existing cleared track within the site. A western section of this proposed lot boundary is through native vegetation. A 20-metre wide carriageway easement is proposed in the eastern section of Lot 2 to the benefit of Lot 1. The second part of the application is buildings and works for the construction of a dwelling. The proposed dwelling, including its associated wastewater disposal areas and vehicle access, is intended to be sited within proposed Lot 2.
Also, so moved again, Mr Mayor, if I may.
Yep. Councillor Janis,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Nicholas. Councillor Janis.
Thank you. We'll start that again. My comments were that I'm assuming that councillors have read the report as presented to them, which was a substantial report, and I note that there was an objection in relation to this application because of the possibility of removing native vegetation. The applicant has agreed to a Section 173 agreement over a portion of this land, which is at the western side of an existing track that runs up on the proposed boundary line. I'm satisfied that the applicant will agree to and apply themselves to that agreement going forward. I have certainly got take note of the objectors' the objector in the fact of removal of native bushland on a proposed fence line that may or may not occur into the future. I'm satisfied that this recommendation should be supported by council, and it's good to see that we're bringing some of those number of lots that we have within the Shire into a more consolidated situation, which this one is. It's 4 into 2. It makes it a more workable area for the applicant going forward, who has a genuine interest, I believe, in the farming sector. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Nicholas.
I concur with Councillor Janis's comments, and I'd like to add that this proposal aligns with our rural land strategy in that the area that is proposed for the house lot is the bush block. So the farming land that is most likely to be able to be worked well as a farm is being left as farm. I think that's terrific. I think another really positive outcome from the whole proposal is that there's a potential, at least, for the existing native bush on that property to be better managed than it currently is. And I think that's a wonderful step forward.
Any further? Councillor Napstone.
I just acknowledge the extent of the recommendation and the work that went into it. Thank you very much. It took me 2 sittings and 3 coffees to get through.
Any further? With that, Councillor Janis, anything further? Final?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Let's go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried.
I'm not asleep.
8.2.2, Ms Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to contract CT 19102, being groundwater monitoring wells and surface water field sampling and water quality testing at 4 landfill sites, including leachate, and gas monitoring at Pulpunka and Myrtleford landfill. The purpose of this report is to provide an amendment to the recommendation to the award of a contract as detailed at Paulpunker and Myrtleford landfill. A tender was conducted in February 2020 for these services, and a contract has been prepared for the provision of these services from the 8th of June 2020 for a period of 3 years, with one option to extend for a further period of 1 year. It must be noted that at the June 2020 Ordinary Council meeting, the recommendation to award this contract was given to Alpine Earth Sciences. It was adopted by Council at this meeting. However, in that recommendation, there had been a miscalculation of the estimated contract value. The miscalculation was with regard to multiplication of the number of samples to be taken across the sites, and the same error was made against all evaluated criteria for those who submitted tenders. Therefore, it hasn't changed the recommendation to award. The recommendation is still to award the contract to Alpine Earth Sciences. However, for transparency, it has changed the estimated contract value of these contracts for this period of time. So the estimated contract value of these contracts is $250,000 plus GST. And again, this is the minimum requirement that we have for sampling from the EPA.
Councillor Forsyth?
Second.
Councillor Nicholas? Councillor Forsyth?
It would have been brilliant if we got it in on the first quote. However, that wasn't to be the case. This is, I believe, just simple compliance with EPA rules. Would that be correct?
There's a number of tests that we have to undertake across our closed landfill sites in order to ensure that they're being managed appropriately and that they're environmentally sustainable. Yes.
So I'm assuming that it is EPA that make that requirement of us?
Yes, it is. It's the EPA.
Thank you. So it's ongoing council business. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholas?
Nothing to add.
Any further? Councillor Keeble?
I'd just say a little bit what Councillor Forsyth was referring to as well, is that by not doing this down the track, an EPA, if we're not doing the right water quality testing and we don't know what's happening in our transfer stations, then the Shire can be up for a way bigger fine, possibly.
Correct.
Yep.
It's also important so that we understand if there's any issue with the management of the site. So some time ago we had an exceedance amount at one of our sites, and that's simply an indicator that we need to change something that we're doing. So it's a very important environmental outcome as well.
Yep.
Any further? Councillor Janus?
Yeah, just to reiterate with the EPA, it is very important because having worked in those facilities previously, if you get a heavy downpour of rain into some of those areas, the amount of leachate that comes out of there, you could certainly clean your old pennies up quite easily by just dipping it into that leachate. And if we don't monitor that correctly for the environment and be seen to be doing the right thing for the environment, we could be liable for heavy fines. So I think it's best to work with the EPA and get it all done properly, and not try and save money unnecessarily on these sort of things. So that's it.
All those in favour? Carried. I will add at this point that it's item 8.2.3. Ms Cook?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Contract CQ20038 Security Patrol and After Hours Call-Out Services for Alpine Shire Council Facilities. The purpose of this report is to recommend the award of a contract for security patrol and after-hours call-out services for Alpine Shire Council facilities. Council intends to enter into a 3-year contract for these services. A tender process has been undertaken and a contract has been prepared commencing the 1st of September for a period of 3 years. 3 parties submitted tenders to this contract. All 3 tenders received were conforming tenders and were evaluated according to the key selection criteria that was advertised. The pricing schedules specify cost per patrol per site and call-out charges per site. The current required frequency of patrols has been used to assess the estimated annual cost of the submitted tenders. Based upon the current frequency and number of sites being serviced, the year 1 cost is approximately $53,000 plus GST, and the total estimated contract value is $165,000 plus GST. There is sufficient allocation within the budget for this contract.
So moved.
Councillor Keeble?
Seconded.
Councillor Janus? Councillor Keeble?
I noticed that the call out, the security call out is for Brighton Myrtleford. Is there anything in place for Kiwa Valley? Is there any need for that security call out in Kiwa Valley?
So we will be reviewing the schedule associated with this contract going forward. I understand that the current contractors were unavailable to undertake any call-out within the Kiwa Valley, so that's the reason why they hadn't been historically. We would have to assess whether the new contractors would be able to undertake this.
Councillor Janis?
No, nothing further to add. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Keeble, has that satisfied your curiosity?
It has.
Any further? All those in favour? Carried. 8.2.4, Ms Cook.
This report regards the tender CQ20021 being the provision of public waste and public amenities servicing and cleaning of council facilities and public amenities. The purpose of this report is to recommend the award of contracts for services tendered under this contract. A tender was conducted in May and June 2020 for these services, and contracts have been prepared for the provision of these services from the 1st of December 2020 for a period of 3 years, with one option to extend for a further period of 3 years. Council currently has separate existing contracts for a number of these services. The existing contracts, with the current contracts for delivering these services ending, a tender has been undertaken to procure services ongoing as required over the next 3 years. The tender was designed to enable submissions in separable parts, being public place waste and recycling collection of the Kiwa Valley, public place waste and recycling collection of the Ovens Valley, cleaning of public area amenities in the Kiwa Valley, cleaning of public area amenities in the Ovens Valley, and the cleaning of council facilities. The tender was designed, a total of 7 submissions were received, and the tender was designed to allow for single or multiple contracts to be awarded due to the differing nature of the service delivery methods and outcome objectives. The assessment of the tenders was undertaken with this in mind, and each priced service was initially assessed individually. A further assessment was undertaken of the combined public place waste and recycling collection and cleaning of public area amenities for each of our valleys. Based upon the evaluation criteria, Ausbright Facilities Management offers the best value for the tendered services, and it is recommended that Council enter into contracts with Ausbright Facility Management for delivery of these services for a period of 3 years with a 3-year option for Council to extend. Also included in the recommendation is a recommendation to extend the current incumbents' contracts by 3 months to enable an appropriate level of transition.
Second.
Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Keeble, I think. Councillor Forsyth.
Look, really quick question, just doing a bit of mental arithmetic here, and that is the extended 3-month period, total estimated cost of about 80,000, so that would mean that per year we're spending about 320,000 maybe, and yet the 3-year contracts that we've got here add up to about 2 mil. The current people did not wish to carry on. Is this correct? Like, what was their kind of?
So they're not a direct comparison because the current incumbents that we are extending by 3 months doesn't include council facilities contracts as well. So there is an additional contract that isn't being included in those tenders. There were tenders by a number of tenderers. They've all been evaluated against the same criteria. The contracts that we are recommending to award represents the best value for council.
Okay. I note the name of the winner tenderer, Bright. Is it local or not?
No, unfortunately, the Ausbright and that is not referencing Bright. Successful local work here in the Shire.
Thank you.
Councillor Keeble.
Mr. Jeremy, last time I don't believe it actually stopped. So just if we just stay paused, I'll just seek feedback from the YouTube channel. It is snowing in Harrodville. Maybe it's affected the telecommunications infrastructure.
5G.
Snowing or hail?
I know it's snowing. I've got some footage. Incredible snow.
So where's the IT department? Where's the IT department?
Just outside, hang on. It's Mr. Jeremy, I've received advice it's still going.
Councillor Keeble.
Okay, that's me. We're up to the contract of cleaning facilities, Osbright. Really extensive tender process, lots of documentation. These jobs are really important for our towns and communities, that they're kept clean, the toilets, our facilities, and the current contractors that are there, they've done they continue to do a great job, a fantastic job, and I want to thank them for all their work, regardless of the decision that happens in a second. But I do want a quick shout out there to Buster. I don't know whether he'd be watching or not, but on behalf of us in the Kiwa Valley, we thank you for all your work that you do. I know that there's people in the Ovens Valley that do just as good work, so I thank them as well. But it's a really important job. Thanks.
Any further? Councillor Janis.
Thank you. The current contractor have their name and contact numbers in the public areas should something go wrong. Will that continue with this with the proposed new service provider?
Yeah, it is my assumption that as we transition into a new contract, that things like changing the numbers across, it'll change to a different number. Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Good point.
Any further? To the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Just on that, I'd also like to congratulate or thank the past contractors for terrific service to the Alpine Shire, and sometimes under very difficult conditions.
Yeah.
9, Assembly of Councillors.
So moved.
Seconder. Councillor Nicholas, all those in favour? Carried. General business from my left. Councillor Forsyth?
No.
Councillor Nicholas?
Yes, I'd just like to note that the ski resorts, Mount Hotham and Falls Creek, won't be opening their lifts for the rest of the season as of an announcement today. And that will be an ongoing concern for the people who run businesses up there and the people who run businesses down here, and we wish you all the best through these hard times.
And does that apply to the resort management boards too, Councillor Nicholas?
As far as I know, the Resort Management Board hasn't made an announcement at this point in time.
Okay.
That's just the Vale making that announcement.
I'm under the impression that Mount Buller are shutting as well too.
I've heard that as a rumour as well. I haven't seen it officiated, but it doesn't surprise me.
Well, to all those that have had positions, hopefully you can find your way to some other form of employment. Councillor Pearce? No. Councillor Keeble?
I just want to thank Charlie, Natalie and Will and the team here and Shire officers for working through this next 6 weeks. I think the responses have been really good. We know it's number 2, we know what we're looking at. It doesn't make it any easier, but I just want to thank everyone for the work that they're doing. And just a general shout out to public, and if anyone else is listening, we all understand that it's pretty tough on people, but it's worth doing the next 6 weeks. Please stay where you are, stay safe. We'll be open again.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. Very succinct and correct terminology. Councillor Epstein?
Okay, just to reiterate what Councillor Janis said at the beginning of the meeting, thanking frontline...
Could you speak closer, please, Councillor?
Thanking frontline staff and essential services, and yes, it's an inconvenience. I hate this mask. But if it gets down to basics, we're part of the animal kingdom. It's a virus, and that gives you the reasoning behind the restrictions and why they're doing what they're doing. It's not personal. It's not to destroy the economy. We've got to pitch in and help.
Councillor Janis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Totally right off COVID at the moment, so Just a question for, I suppose, or to Mr. Bird or Mr. Jeremy. It's in relation to the Community Resilience Committee and or the Municipal Emergency Management Committee. Could I just put a sort of a question on, or a statement on notice for you, for the inclusion of our CFA group officers at either one of those committees for their involvement, for the community involvement side of being involved and knowing what's going on with the and also having input into those committees. They seem to have been left off the list the last number of meetings, and I'm just wondering whether you could get an inclusion back for our group officers or their representatives back onto one of those committees as you see fit.
Mr. Jeremy, do you have a response for Councillor Janis?
Thank you, Councillor Janis. I've taken a note and I will follow up with that with you after this meeting.
Thank you. Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Motions for which notice has previously been given, well, there's none. Reception and reading of petitions, which there's none, but we do have documents for sealing. Got a mover and a seconder, please.
Move.
Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Knapstein, all those in favour? Carried. The CEO's just passed me a note suggesting that snow down to 400 metres forecast, which will mean approximately 86% of the Alpine Shire will probably get snow. So it is cold outside, I can vouch for that. It's currently snowing in Harrietville. If there being no further business, I'm going to close the meeting and declare the meeting closed at, can I have someone give me a time, please? Is it
4:51?
4:51? Thank you very much to all those outside. Stay safe. Please adhere to the requirements and good night.
You can't stop it. Okay. So what I suggest is we turn our microphones off.
Level crawl out.